All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, feast your eyes and tune your ears. It's that time again. We are live with another episode of The Authority Project. It's the video podcast streamed on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Periscope, where we talk to digital marketers, business coaches, and creators of all kinds on how they've built authority in their field and how you can mimic their success. Developing authority, building your audience, and attracting better clients to your own business. Now, without further ado, let's bring to the virtual stage your host, Brian S. Arnold.
The Brian with the eye is in the building.
Yes,
finally,
sir.
for the first time, Brian.
We got a double Brian. Double Brian's going today.
Yes, sir. For the first time ever, folks, this is going to be epic. I told you. I've been posting everywhere. As you can see, we have matching shirts. I'm going to move my mic around so you can see we have matching shirts.
Oh, yeah.
We'll talk about that later. But for the near fam out there that is hopefully jumping on the stream, you already know what it is. So, yeah, man. Great to have you on here, buddy. So let's get right to it. I want you to tell us, first of all, before we get all into this, who you are personally and then professionally.
Sure. So I am a girl dad of 3 little girls and who range the age from 10 to 6. I'm diehard Pittsburgh sports fan. So everything I have is black and yellow. We can't really help it when you're from Pittsburgh. It's just kind of how it all works. I love driving a Jeep, which is like kind of one of the cool hobbies I have that, and it happens to be black and yellow, it kind of fits into the brand. And I've always, enjoyed sports, played college hockey, kind of live in that space. And so, and as a profession, I'm a digital futurist, is what I kind of label myself today, which a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have said that was what I would have labeled, but it kind of ties together my unique background. I worked 9 years in cybersecurity for the Department of Defense, and then I chased after my dream job, which was a technology evangelist at a startup. And then for the last little over 6 years, I've been a full-time keynote speaker, podcaster, and creating content online. And of course, a big piece of that and growing my brand over the last 6 years was live streaming. So that's kind of brings us to that point now. And, then of course, COVID happens. And I like to say I turned into an unemployed keynote speaker in many cases. But with COVID and everything that was going on in that space, I switched my focus to virtual. I wouldn't say I switched my focus, more so than I used the last 5 years or so. I used virtual or social or online to build my offline speaking business. And now still using virtual, but now I'm selling virtual services. So, not a direct comparison and been a little bit of a learning curve, but it's been a fun journey.
I love it. So we're going to get right into it. So we're going to go back first. So take us first back to the Department of Defense and we'll work from there. Start
Sure.
there.
So I like to say as a lot of, for me, a lot of my success has been luck, right? I've been very lucky. I couldn't get a job in IT after college. I graduated in 2003. I worked for UPS. I actually loved working for UPS. It was a great union job and kept me in great shape. But I kind of knew I needed to get something in the tech space, or I probably would still be working UPS to this day, right? So I happened to be buying milk in the grocery store line wearing fraternity letters, and the person in front of me ended up offering me a job and a security clearance if I could get a security clearance at an overnight help desk in cybersecurity. And so I knew nothing of cybersecurity. I didn't take a single course in it. In college, of course, even in 2003, 2004, cyber, although was a thing, no one was really focused on it or prioritizing it. And then to continue on that luck journey, about 6 months or 9 months into that help desk role, the boss of the help desk came in on a Friday, and he said, "Hey, first person to raise their hand that wants to go to South Korea to teach a course on Monday gets to do it." And I happen to have my hand up first. He asked me, he's like, "Do you have a passport?" I was like, no, but I've been to the Caribbean. And he's like, that doesn't count. And I had to get a same-day passport. I went into Washington, D.C., got a same-day passport. I flew to Seoul, Korea on Sunday, my first time ever leaving the country. I had to take a 2-hour high-speed train down to the U.S. military base in Daegu. And I taught a 5-day class that like every night I went back to the hotel or the barracks and learned what I was teaching the next day. It was very much like one of those things where I was learning on the go. And luck will have it, the class went super successful. When I landed and made it back into the office, the government lead was like, hey, we'll increase the amount of courses you guys have on contract if Brian's the one doing it. And so I kind of got I'd say a 4-level promotion. Wow. And I ended up staying in that role for almost 8 years, almost 9 years. We grew it to a team of 32 employees, traveling to 54 countries at one point, every U.S. military base around. I went 3 trips to Iraq, 2 to Afghanistan. And it was one hell of a journey. I loved it. It was a heck of a lot of fun. But yeah, luck that I was in the grocery store at the right time for someone to give me a clearance. And then, lucky to not be on a phone call and to be the first to raise my hand and then take on that opportunity that I had, teaching these online courses. And really what we did was my job was to get the different branches of the military to share policies. So like get the Army to share with the Navy, which anyone that needs. So it was a really fun learning experience at the DoD.
Awesome, man. Okay, so let's jump forward to the days of, I'll say, Meerkat, Blab, and then maybe a little bit of Snapchat, and going forward with when mobile live streaming started to come more to light, because live streaming was there. I mean, you always had livestream .com, I guess, but it was a blessing and a curse. Can you kind of like go into that? Just go into that.
Sure. Yeah. What I'm saying. So like February 27th, 2014, I was running a Google Plus Hangout show where we did a weekly interview show. And I was working with brands as an influencer. I happened to be in Barcelona, Spain, working with Dell, and we were creating video content at one of the largest conferences in the world called Mobile World Congress. And we spent 4 days creating video content. I mean, like all kinds of interviewing, all tech and gear and IoT and mobile. And I got a text message from a friend. His name's Tom, Bowtie Tom, who worked at Twitter at the time. And he's like, "Hey, Fanzo, I know you love Twitter, and Ashton Kutcher and Gary Vaynerchuk just went live for the first time on this app called Meerkat. You should check it out." And I can tell you, I was like, "What? Going live to Twitter?" And I was like, I just did all this video, and so I stood up, walked about 5 feet. I opened the app. I hit download. I authenticated with Twitter, and I just hit go, right? Like everybody does in their first one. Right. It tweeted out without a title, without a description. It was like hashtag Meerkat is what it happened to say. And I had one viewer, Joe from Indiana. He's now famous because I tell this story on stages a lot. And I was like, "What's up, Twitter?" And like my one viewer was on there, and Joe was like, "Hey, is that the Microsoft booth over there? Can you show me the new Microsoft phone?" And that was the moment of my aha, because I was there for 4 days creating video content that was Dell was going to share on their channels. We were going to share on our channels. And never once did I go over to the Microsoft booth to show the phone. And that moment of, oh my goodness, a live audience can help shape how I create content, and it can be real and authentic, was like amazing. Now, it doesn't have a beautiful story because I walked about 5 more feet. The Wi-Fi signal dropped, and that was the end of my podcast. And I didn't go live again until the following week when I landed at South by. And then during South by is when Meerkat blew up. Yeah. I had 12,000 people watching me ride in the Uber, helping me pick out which bagel I was going to have in the morning. And since that day, I've now done over 3,500 live streams. Wow. Grew on some Periscope. Made some mistakes. I wasn't a fan of Periscope when Periscope started. Periscope was actually an app that Twitter bought before Meerkat was ever out there. Right. They just hadn't released it yet. And so Meerkat was using the Twitter API. My joke is I still have more followers on Meerkat than I still do all of my social media combined. Like that was I got my 15 minutes of fame on an app that literally lasted 366 days. And then it kind of lost its Twitter access, and it kind of fell apart. But, I went from there to Periscope. The app called Blab, of course, came on, which I fell in love with. I called the gateway to live streaming. And then Facebook Live, and then, YouTube Live, Instagram Live, now, of course, LinkedIn Live. And it's been amazing. I owe so much of my brand for my success, for my business, to live streaming. It's really just one of those things. It was the medium that fit my style the best. I'm like real raw. I don't like perfection, not great at like SEO optimization, not great at like, editing or copy, but I love talking, telling stories, creating content. And live streaming has been, it's been a blessing for me throughout my, my career, my world. And I even, my girlfriend, to this day, I actually met her through, she was running a live streaming channel for the Weather Channel. And I went to a session that she was on a panel at the time, because I was such a big fan of how they were doing live streaming. And, fast forward a couple of years later, we connected, and now we're dating. So I have a lot to thank when it comes to live streaming.
That I did not know. There you go. Okay, so I want to just channel that back really quick, because I want to touch on something, because this is like when Meerkat went down. We all knew about that, because there were some iffy things about that, some sketchy things about that, about how many people were actually following with that kind of thing. So when it finally went down, a lot of people put a lot of trust in that platform, and they also went down, and I including me, to be honest. I've been off for a while. You know that, Brian.
Yeah, I know.
I've been off for a while, because I put so much time. We got shirts, we got everything.
Oh, we still have the shirts years later, right? Like, I mean, that's how much we like fell in love. Like, we went all in, and like still have the shirts to this day.
Right. I mean, we're talking mirror language and all this kind of crazy stuff. We were all in, and I think what it taught us is that we cannot put so much trust into one platform, or you're gonna lose yourself in that. You know what I'm saying? And you have to somehow create your own platform, which is what this is all about, really, about what this is all about. So.
Yeah, it was, I think one of the things with Meerkat too, it was a mistake I made. I made this weird, so like, it's still to this day something I joke about, but the now acting, executive over at Twitter was the founder of Periscope. And when Periscope came out, I just did not like the interaction. I didn't like the comment. Like, there were so many things that Meerkat had that we loved, that I actually uninstalled Periscope after becoming verified on Meerkat, posted on YouTube. And apparently for like a year, the Periscope team used that. Like, they played that video on like in their team, and like I couldn't get any Periscope love. Like it was a mistake. It was a mistake 100% on my part. Like, it was like I think the lesson to me, what I learned, like, I was always preaching the importance of community, right? And having a community, like, it's not important to build a following on a channel. It's important to build a community that will follow you wherever you go.
Yeah.
But it's easy to say that, but it's a whole nother thing when we have to think about what did it all mean? And I think for a lot of us, we associated our brand, our success, our community, our stories to the mechanics that existed in Meerkat, and kind of were attached too much. Right. And I think if we take a step back, if we can go all in on the platform, but we have to understand and be able to embrace that. If we strip away the mechanics of that platform, what was it that people liked? And like you, like, even to this day, I'll get comments like, Brian, I wish you still did your daily streams. Like, I haven't done and I was actually telling Jennifer the other day, like, I mean, I was going live at one point on 4 platforms a day, every single day. I was the guy with 6 cell phones on 5 different carriers, so I could go live on all the different channels. It taught us a lot. I think, it taught us a lot about how easily something that is relying on a social network API can go away, right? It taught us a lot about, even like where we see TikTok and now Instagram Reels and all the things that go on there. For me, I love exploring and trying new mediums. But I would say my favorite thing, I love that. We got Jamie in the house too. My favorite thing to do is I look at the platform to decide what I can learn as a creator. Yeah. Not how can I shift all of my attention to the platform. And I think, Meerkat was the early days. I think we had to learn the lesson the hard way.
Right, exactly. And just to I always think now that, because I see a lot of people shifting to especially YouTube now. Because meanwhile, we're on this thing here, but meanwhile, YouTube is still around.
Yep.
Facebook's still around, and we're spending so much time on this thing that sometimes the one-off apps, they're going to be, it's a risk.
Yep.
But at this point, we know that YouTube is probably not going anywhere. Facebook is probably not going anywhere. Now, I don't know about the deregulation they're trying to do with the government. That's a whole nother issue. But you still have to be careful, build a community, so like you said, it can go anywhere that you are. So unbelievable. So I want to give you an easy question.
All right.
We want to get to the good stuff here. Tell us how to live stream correctly.
Well, the first step is the sign that you see here, right? So we'll just go with we'll keep it easy to begin with, right? You have to press the damn button. But my whole mantra with press the damn button is that you don't know what works until you try it, right? You don't know how it all works. But I think to answer that question, I look at live streaming as participatory content, and I've been saying this for the longest time. It's our ability to have this two-way interaction, right? Yes, we're on video, but we, the people that are commenting, the people that are watching are able to, interact and engage. And I think that's what the magic of live streaming. Yes, you can live stream just an interview and ignore the audience. Yes, you can live stream a keynote or the presidential inauguration, whatever it may be. Those are live streaming, but the live streaming that I believe creates trust and brand affinity and can really change the game is the live streaming that is truly participatory. And so I think, creating a live stream, one of the secrets is consistency. I will say, out of all, and you mentioned YouTube. I mean, YouTube is that for life. One of my really close friends, Amy Landino, she has a channel called Amy TV over there on YouTube. I mean, she uploaded a video every single week for 7 years and was slowly getting momentum. And in the last year and a half, it has over 300,000 followers, 500,000 followers, and it exploded. But it's attribution to her consistency, to finding her audience, to building that rapport. And live streaming is that same way, right? No one today is all of a sudden getting excited to jump on something to look at live streaming. Back in the day, Meerkat, it was you open up in the morning, it's who's streaming, right? You had a lunch break, who, it was such a and it was also a community, right? I think that's to me, to this day, I still think of Meerkat as the greatest online community experience I've ever had, right? For me, it was, I knew people's good things, bad things. We could interact. It didn't matter if we were on camera. We would have as much community connection if you were the broadcaster or you were the person that was watching, right? And I think that's kind of the beauty. But yeah, I think live streaming comes down to consistency, pressing the damn button, and figuring out what works. And then really kind of getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And I have two rules with everyone that I talk with live streaming. The first one is you have to embrace that perfection is a fairy tale. The only guarantee with live video is something will go wrong. It's guaranteed. And the second one is control. You can't control the comments, can't control, my favorite stories was we live streamed for Applebee's back in 2015. We took over their entire website with Meerkat for 12 hours, and Ruby Tuesdays jumped into the comments, right? And it was cool. The brand was so cool. The CMO was there, and she's like, "Well, we know that they're watching, right?" To them, they took it as a compliment. For other brands, they're like, "What if our competition watched this? Or what if we have trolls, right?" And so I think for me, that's the second rule is so important, that, control is an illusion. You can't control what's out there. You can't control what happens. But if you're authentic and real and raw, you can kind of roll with those punches. So that's it's the idea of consistency, press the damn button, embrace perfection's a fairy tale, and control's an illusion.
I love it. And Germany's on here. She agrees Meerkat with the people. Yeah, I tell you what, lifelong friends, right? And you and I are still virtual friends yet. We haven't seen each other face to face yet. That'll happen. Right. But even after all these years, we can still come together. It's like I remember when I first saw Vincenzo, like you were saying, Vincenzo, and I saw him for the first time. It was just it was so natural. Yep. It's like we've known each other for years, So getting that community, is so important, and it's you just don't know where it'll come. It'll push you forward, going forward. So just work on that community. I love how you said that. So speaking of pushing forward, I'm going to take one of your phrases that I know you had for a while. How did you take FOMO to push you forward in being on top of the latest social media trends?
So that was something, like the fear of missing out, FOMO. I host a podcast called FOMO Fans. And for me, it was something I love, right? Like I love trying new things. Like when a new app comes out, and for me, I'm, in context, I'm a business person for these apps, right? Like when I look at like TikTok, I'm looking at it from a business value, right? Like how are they doing transitions? Why are people spending 54 minutes on TikTok and they're spending 2.5 minutes on Twitter app when they open, right? Like what are the compelling things? What can we learn from that as a business owner? And like, I really enjoy, for years, like my hobby was like, I would get done working and I would jailbreak an iPhone, right? Like I'm running the beta iOS on my iPad right now.
Okay.
And it's crashing like crazy and it's frustrating, but it's like what I've always loved. And for me, I kind of thought lots of people love that, right? Like that fear of missing out. And so I spent like a while trying to get people to embrace their FOMO, right? Like own your FOMO. And then I started to learn that not everyone and most people don't like fear. They don't like change. They don't like new things. And so I switched my model and was like, I'm going to help cure people's fear of missing out by being the one I'm on every social network. You pick a social network that's out there and look up iSocial Fans. I can almost guarantee I'm there. And if I'm not there, you should message me and let me know because I'll create an account, right? But when I work with my clients or brands or I'm giving talks, I don't advise everyone to be on every app, right? I help them build a strategy. But for me, it was a way to do what I loved in this space, help out people, and also kind of carve out my own little, idea of it was always funny. All of a sudden it became the thing where they're like, well, there's a new app out. The first person people search was my username because they knew that I would be on it. I'd have beta access or whatever, which is a really cool, feeling. And, it's like a lot of fun. I've had lots of failures where I spent hours upon an app that maybe never even saw the light of day. Or I tried a bunch of things that, an app would tell me, hey, we're going to do all these things. And then they never actually did. So it could never, turn into anything. But for every one of those, there's also, Meerkat, where I wouldn't trade that year on Meerkat for anything. Right. And I think that to me is part of the beauty. And, I think something you said too, in the Meerkat thing that I think is important is that, and I talk about this all the time, is that social media, digital live streaming will never replace what we do offline. Yeah. And this is a line my dad said. I give credit to my dad. My dad was like, well, son, you should, focus on the handshakes. And I said, Dad, social media doesn't replace a handshake. It gives us the opportunity to have more handshakes and turn some handshakes into hugs and selfies, right?
Yeah,
that was me being me. But that's like, when I talk about Meerkat, every time I met somebody that was part of that Meerkat community for the first time, man, it was the biggest hug. It wasn't like, how's the weather? How's your family? It was, this is what we know about you. It was such a dynamic. And it ultimately, it's what I do still to this day, right? Like the virtual keynotes and things that I'm giving right now is all about helping people see the synergy between innovation and humanity, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think to be more human and more connected and more, zen means we have to have less technology. I just think we have to strategically understand where technology, social media, live streaming fits into our lives, and then figuring out where that kind of beautiful synergy. I don't believe in balance. I believe in more of a synergy of kind of working that mold. But that's what that was for me. FOMO was part of that, and it also spurred probably my number one hashtag. The first hashtag I ever associated with me, for people asked, and that's still what I use today. I replied to a tweet today with it. When someone's like, Brian, how do you grow a community online? And my answer to this day has been, show you care, right? Mm-hmm. Care a little bit more about others. And if you're a brand, an answer to that is, before you reply to somebody, click on their profile, learn a little bit about them, right? Rather than just, replying and saying, thank you for the comment, see what they care about and say, thanks for the comment. Hope you had a great time on your vacation that I saw you just tweeted about, right? That little bit of caring starts to build that rapport and build that trust. And, it's still the secret today. I don't care what social network you're on, what brand you're on. If you can find ways to, care about others and your followers and the content you share, you can start to really, embrace and empower a pretty powerful community.
It's a very big difference. I'm glad you said that. It's a huge difference on what people, how you give somebody an experience. I say an experience, whereas, it's not just cookie cutter. Like,
Yep.
I try to get that with all of my guests, like give them an experience, give them something to really not forget you. Right.
Yep.
So,
And when someone hears experience, I know some people might not like be able to visualize what is that. And I always use the word access. Give people access to you, to why you do what you do, to who you are, the things you're good at, the things you're bad at. Access, because experience is like, wow, I think we've all had that feeling like, why is anybody going to care about me, or my experiences? Like, I'm just me, and it's okay to feel that way. But I feel like when we give people access into who we are, that's where that magic happens, and that's where those experiences starts to be shared. I've told these stories, like my story with the DoD, I've told those stories 4,000 times, right? Like interviews and so for me, they're very natural to kind of build them into the sequence. But early on, when someone asked a question about hey, how did you get into the Department of Defense? I probably told 14 different ways of doing it. And then all of a sudden I was like, well, why don't I just give them access into really how it all happened? And and you start to figure that out. And so that's where press the damn button for me comes in, is you don't figure out what works. No one knows, right? And it's so beautiful. I love watching people press the damn button isn't just live video for me. It's putting your story out there to the world, because I do believe we all have a story to tell. But the problem is we make excuses and we have all these barriers for us doing it. And when you press the damn button and you're like, oh my God, it's that easy. And you'll start to realize something you would have never thought someone connected with, all of a sudden they connect with. And then all of a sudden that becomes part of your story and part of your brand. And it's just a beautiful thing to see. And I think right now, where we're at right now, where everyone's being forced to change, I hope they can see that beauty in, I don't like forcing people to change, because most people, when you're forcing them to change, they hate everything. And it takes them a long while to have a perspective. But I think, if you take a new approach, think about how many richer conversations you've had with people that you probably worked with, but virtually you've had more virtual happy hours than you ever had before, right? We had my dad's 67th birthday, and on Zoom. He lives in Arizona, I'm in Virginia, and he's it was one of his favorite birthdays because we spent 2.5 hours just having a conversation with the whole family on Zoom. Wow. And when we're in person, it's having a couple of beers, hanging out, we maybe talk for 15 minutes, right? And so that's kind of the beauty of, if you're willing to shift your perspective at the power of virtual, it can really be, a life changer.
That's a great point. That's such a great point. Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's start to dive in now. We're at the half hour point a little bit here. Yep. Let's start to dive in into some how-to stuff. How did you start working with the big brands? Take us there, monetizing with sponsorships off your live stream platform or off of that. How did you start connecting and getting into that space?
So for me, I actually got another piece of me being lucky, right? I think that's a theme here. In the fall of 2013, I got awarded the top 25 social business leaders of the future by The Economist. And they put out this big award, and people always well, awards don't pay the bills. And this award sent me to 14 events for free, a bunch of IBM events, SAP events, got to go to a couple of TED Talks. And it connected me with a lot of these thought leaders that were, the head of Ford, Scott Monty, and I got to connect with a lot of these people. But the honest truth is, I said yes to every single opportunity for 2.5 years. And if it was on my dime or their dime, if it was hey, we want you to come to this event, we'll give you a free ticket and we'll fly you out. And when I was there, my goal was to really show I care, right? The same thing I talked about before, how could I go above and beyond to show people who I was, to build this rapport? And, that was a big thing for me, right? And, it was also how do you stand out, right? And I think if you have a niche, for those that have a niche or a niche, standing out is a little easier, right? I believe if you have one, you should own it and crush it and keep going. For those of you that are like me, where you don't kind of have a niche, you like talking and doing a little bit of everything, working with everyone, you can still find success. It's something I preach a lot. I'm the CEO of Team No Niche. But you have to do things a little differently. You have to stand out and be memorable based on your relationships, based on conversations, maybe based on the way you dress, something that's different. And so for me, that was early on, it was building those relationships, going above and beyond, right? When someone would say, you don't have to go to these sessions, we would love for you, we're going to pay for you a ticket. You need to go to 2 sessions. I would go to 5 sessions, but I wouldn't tell them like, hey, I went to 5 sessions. I would create content and share and amplify it everywhere to kind of like, show on their radar that I was willing to go above and beyond. And, as that kind of took off and like, this was like before an influencer was even a thing, right? 2014, 2015, and then I started to figure out, okay, I didn't want people to pay for my influence, like pay for me to tweet good about them, but I wanted them to pay me to do what I do really well, which happened to be live streaming, right? And so I would get a lot of brands that I would say, hey, we want to give you a free ticket to here, and we're going to bring you out to this event. And I was like, oh, sweet. And just so you know, like, I don't know if like your budget or whatever, but like I have a really large live streaming audience. What if I went live 3 days while I'm there? Would you be willing to, give me $1,500 and I'll interview one of your executives? And they're like, well, yeah, it's on your channel. Like, I don't have to risk it. Like, and so like that was slowly kind of how I grew that. And it's a process, right? Like figuring out what you're good at, how it relates to the brand. I was a big data person. So like, I would always be like, what are you measuring for success? And then I would build my content to fit that. I also turned down a lot of opportunities because I think we have especially early on, when anyone's throwing money at you to do anything, you're going to be like, yes, yes, yes. And when you do that, you start to water down your brand, and your audience starts to kind of lose that, like, hey, what are we all about? And so, I turned down a lot of brands. I've been creating content on my blog since 2014 every week. I've had 5 podcasts. I did 300 or almost 500 Google Plus interviews. And all of that was free, right? None of that was monetized. I wasn't making money per se on any of that, but these were all ways of me telling my story, connecting with people. And, through that time, I started to segue to get on stages to speak, right? All of a sudden, when a brand would say, hey, Brian, we want to bring you out to, to go to our event, I would say, can I speak? And they're like, well, we have like the last session on the last Friday, if you're willing to take that. And I'd be like, yeah. And there'd be 8 people in the audience, right? Yeah. And I would give the best presentation that I've ever given in that moment, right? And for me, it was always about like just proving like, hey, this is who I am, building that trust. And and now it's it's definitely paid off. Like even like throughout my brand and things that I'm pivoting, like COVID, like many of us, it crushed my business. I lost 18 speaking gigs. I lost all 6 of my full-time clients, all in that first week of March. But at the same time, I've pivoted multiple times throughout this piece and like how I'm monetized. And now I'm doing more brand partnerships than I've ever done in my career. I did a GoDaddy one today where I partnered with GoDaddy on a content series that they're working on, and they reached out to me and said, hey, we think you're a good fit with your audience. We went back and forth. We built out a plan. I said, hey, I'll create this content with these goals and you'll pay me this money and let's create a partnership. And, like now I focus a lot on partnerships, not on campaigns. I think that was a mistake early on. I would be like, oh, I'll do this campaign. And it was very one-off. Yeah. And instead now I'm like, I want to get 6 clients and do 10 projects with them rather than getting 60 clients that I'm doing 1 project with, right? Which is, is what I think a tendency for a lot of us to do. And the other thing about it is figuring out like the pricing model. It's all figuring out, like you try things out, right? Like I'm going to charge this amount. If they say no, and you just figure out what your time works. And like now I have it much more dialed in. I have a speaker agent that handles all my negotiations, my contracts. She does a good job of me not saying yes to everything. She kind of like my calendar, unless there's good friends from like Meerkat days where they ask me to do things, and I say yes anytime. But yeah, it's a journey. But for me, like 2015, 2016, it was less than 50% of my revenue, right? In 2018, speaking and influencer work made up 100% of my revenue, right? Like completely, had switched my entire business model. But it was just, based on learning and figuring out what worked and what people were willing to pay, and ultimately how I could stand out, be myself, but also, connect with these brands.
I have many questions now on that, because I want you, because you said a lot there.
Yep.
I just want to sum up, just so that people are clear, and let me know if I'm wrong. Starting with a lot of content, started just content that doesn't scale.
Yep.
Putting it out there consistently, and maybe in the right places too. So that
or even not in the right places, because all you need is one right person to see it, right? Like we have to, like that's part of this game. Like, I mean, my YouTube channel, I mean, I have a new YouTube channel now, which is a completely different focus, but my YouTube channel was like a dumping grounds of randomness for a long time. A separate channel that I had. The new channel now, I'm very much more strategic, but that YouTube channel of randomness would generate me $50,000 a year, where people would search for something specific. They would see a video, it had 30 views, right? Like, but they would be like, oh my goodness, the way you told a story, or your message, or hey, I love that you're transparent, whatever it may be, is a big deal, right? And I think the other piece of it is everyone, like, I mean, we've all, Gary Vaynerchuk, like jab, 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 right hook. Like I have the book over there over my shoulder. There's a part of that I believe in, right? But for me, like, part of it also is like, you have to put yourself out there and prove who you are before, like I always say, like, you have to care and show the brand what you're doing, what you're willing to do before they care about you, right? Like for me, like one of the best success stories for this was Dell. I wanted to be a host of one of the Dell's big events. And we had a great conversation, and they were like, you have too much IBM and SAP in your feed. Like, you're just too much. And I was like, well, it's because they pay me and I work with them. And like, if you pay me and work with me, like, you'll be in my feed. Right. And they're like, no, I don't think that's going to work. And I was like, well, that's how I work. Like, I don't have one brand affinity. I work with lots of brands. And anyone could be bitter about that, right? And anyone could have posted like on social and like, I can't believe Dell wasn't working with me. But what I did instead was I went through their blog for a whole week, went through their content and their strategy, turned in a whole list of, okay, what is the content they care about? What are they talking about? And for an entire year, I created content, not tagging Dell, not shoving it in their face, but creating content that was aligned with their mission. And about 10 months into it, they came to me and we're like, Brian, like, our executive team can't stop seeing your content, and everything you're doing is aligned. And I think you were right. Like, we need to have you on stage. And I'm like, oh, I'm glad we agree. Like, but like, ultimately, it was me, and like believing in the process. And it might not have worked, right? I've done it with brands that it hasn't worked. But I think we have a tendency, especially younger generation, and I'm not usually one that bashes the generation, but to be like me, or hey, I created a TikTok account. I'm gonna reach out to 10 brands. They should sponsor me. Yeah. Well, why the hell should they sponsor? Like, prove to me that you can get your audience to make a decision based on who you are, what you do, or the content you create. Like, prove to me that, right? Like, I mean, I one of my use cases I still use today was from like 3 years ago. I sent out one tweet about Grammarly, which Grammarly, the tool that checks your spelling and stuff. And for like years, I would joke, like, the reason I didn't follow my dream job, which is to be a sportscaster on ESPN, was it required too much English classes, and I wasn't great at English. I wasn't great at spelling or grammar, and I made that known. And so when this tool came out, I took the affiliate link, and one tweet was like, oh my goodness, I finally found the tool for me. That tool generated like one tweet, 280 people who signed up for the paid account, right? Like, wow. And this is, I maybe had 12,000 followers at the time or something, and like I remember like that brand came to me and was like, we just want to work with, like, what is going on, right? And so like I still use that as a use case. Like, if the brand connection is correct, you should be able to show that power of influence, right? And I think that's a big piece. People make a mistake. They ask too early. They expect because you have a following, right? Like I can tell you some of the best influencers, content creators that are paid right now don't have a huge following. They have a lot of people that will make decisions based on them, right? Like if you have 8,000 followers and 40% of them will buy a product based on you using it or participating on it, that's better than Kanye West with 9 million followers, and he only gets 1% of them to do anything because they don't believe what he's talking about, right? Like, and I think we kind of have that mistake, and even Meerkat days. Like for me, Meerkat, like, and YouTubers have made this mistake for a while too. Like, hey, I want to work with this YouTuber. They have all this following. Then we work with them, and their following isn't people that would buy our product, right? Or their style of creating content doesn't match our brand image. And now we're going to blame PewDiePie when he did the same thing for his entire life. It was you, Disney, that made the mistake of working with somebody that had this kind of brand association, right? Like, we blame the influencer, like we bash that creator. He was him the whole way. It was the brand. And so like that to me has been the secret, and also like people don't know what you're willing to do or open to do until you kind of put it out there, right? Like you have to kind of, hey, I'm willing to do this if a brand's willing to do it. And I think, that's part of that jab, 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 right hook. Like put yourself out there, just keep jabbing. And then when a brand that you think aligns that you can make a difference, make that right hook and make an ask.
Awesome. I love it. We got more Mir fam coming in here.
I like it.
So I want to dive into an issue that I just remember from way back. I will never forget it. And I think, let me just ask this question first. Do brands vet you as far as how much they would pay you? Because I remember your story about Twitter one time, Twitter following issue where a client wouldn't pay unless you had a certain amount of followers. Is that correct? I remember that distinctly. Wow. I'm just like, what is happening here? Could you just go into that story a little bit and maybe other brands look at you and how they vet you?
Yep. Yeah. So I think with digital, I think we should, like, if you don't know what someone's services, like the value of someone's services or the products you're buying, if you don't know if they're worthwhile, it's because you didn't do the research. Like, all of the data is out there today. Like 10 years ago, completely different story. Yeah. Today it's out there. But early on, like, influencer marketing has gone through like this, and just to be clear, like, brand association and super fans of brands has been around since like the 1900s, right? When someone was like, hey, this person drives a car and they drive through the city more than anyone else. Like, let's get that person driving our car, because the more people that see our brand of car are going to buy, it's not brand new in that sense. Right. I actually blame social networks for the confusion, because they created these vanity metrics like likes and comments and followers that we as marketers became lazy. And rather than, judging people based on the success metrics that mattered for our business, we became lazy and we're like, can you make this hashtag trend? Right. And for anyone that knew Twitter early on, like, to make a hashtag trend early on, it did not take much work, right? Like, it was very little work to make a hashtag trend. Or like, hey, we want you to, like, I used to expose these people, but they were like, hey, we want to work with you to get our Twitter account to 10,000 followers. Or you can go and you could buy a bot for, like, right. So I would say, yeah, pay me $5,000. I would find a bot. It was $800. It would buy you those followers, right? Like, and so, like, when I look at a lot that, like, we all had to figure that out, right? And I think I'm hearing a lot right now. Actually, someone tweeted me today. Actually, it was Business Insider, and they're asking for a quote because I tweeted out today that I'm having more brand partnerships opportunities than I ever in my entire career during COVID, which I think is very interesting. And they were like, wow, we're hearing that kind of the opposite. Like, people are, and I was like, well, here's the thing. I was like, the opposite is people aren't willing to spend money on just random likes or followers. They want to spend money on, like, woo, this guy has audience or this girl has audience that we want to get. And I always say, like, true influencer marketing collaboration is about is connecting trust, right? So, like, GoDaddy's working with me, right? GoDaddy has a content series, and they contacted me and said, Brian, we think this content series is right up your alley about change and helping people learn. Your audience, you talk about that same message. We don't have a lot of the same followers. We want to reach your audience. Can we co-create content together so we can use the trust that you have with this audience so that you can bring them to our content, right? Like, that's this circle. And the funny thing was, there was no conversation about likes, followers, amount of clicks that they wanted, right? Like, it was, we know that you have this. We believe that if you put this content in front of your audience, the right people will get there. And so I think, when the one that you're referring to, there was a time where, and there was actually a time where I was the only person with less than 250,000 followers that was hired to work with this brand. Okay. And I was also the only one that generated 6 figures worth of business. Yeah. And yet I wasn't asked to come back the next year because the influencer company said our tool doesn't measure anybody without 1 million followers. And I was like, oh, that's funny. I generated the most business of all of us on this campaign. Yeah. But I think that's changed a little bit now. We're kind of getting a little bit smarter in that area. And and as influencers, like, there was no rule book. There was no way to sell yourself, market yourself. And so, like, that, that's something that, we have to learn and kind of evolve. But yeah, it was interesting times. Like, I remember there was multiple times where someone would pay me. They would say, we want to pay. How much does it cost for you to send 10 tweets at our event? And I was like, you just want me to send 10 tweets? Like, really? Like, that's like, okay, sure. I can send, like, I don't know how you're measuring that or pitching that to your boss. But like, there was some interesting times, that's for sure.
Awesome. Well, Tammy's saying hi to both of us. Brian with a Y and Brian with an I. All right, Tammy, thank you so much for coming through. Thanks for all the Mir love here. Love it. So, and I honestly, I'm going to say this to you honestly, truly, you're one of the best speakers that I know. I told you that before we got on the show. And can you just tell us about your process for getting ready for a speaking event? And this is a two-part question, I guess. What defines an epic presentation, which is what I think you only do?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that kind words. I believe a epic presentation is the relatability and connectiveness you have with your audience, right? I think it doesn't matter about the amount of audience, doesn't matter about truly the content or that's out there, but how good are you at relating your story, your message to what the audience cares about, right? And it can be, you can be an educational speaker, you can be a motivational speaker, inspirational, it can be entertainment. I don't care what it is. Like great entertainment is because that person's performance connected with the audience who appreciates that kind of entertainment, right? Like, I don't care if you have the greatest musician in the world and you don't like that type of music, it's not going to be an epic performance because the disconnect there. And I think that's a way for speakers as well. And for me, the interesting thing, like I started my speaking career back in 2005 when I was at the government. They actually sent me to a formal training, and it said like, don't talk fast, don't talk with your hands, don't move around a lot. As you can tell, I did not listen to a word said, apparently. But that was when I kind of started. And throughout the journey of like figuring this whole thing out was figuring out how to design the talk that was best fit to me, and for me to kind of scope it out what was best for my audience. And so I have a rule of 5. It's the same with virtual. It's the same with offline, that every speech, if it's an hour or if it's 10 minutes, like this is I have a rule of 5. And so the rule of 5 is 3 of the things that I write down on a sticky note. Like I have my sticky notes right here. And I do it every time I give a talk. I write down 3 things, usually one like a statement, that the audience should remember when they leave, right? So it could be press the damn button. It could be, social media will never replace a handshake. Whatever it may be. 3 things, right? That's all I want them to remember, right? It could be an hour, 3 things. And I write them down because that's my like glue to bring things back. So like there are things that I'll often recap. There are things I'll call back. And then the 4th thing I write down is a story or an experience that I believe connects those 3 things with the unique audience that I'm there, right? So, even though I give, usually in a year, I have 4 keynote programs that someone can buy. Each keynote program, that number 4 is different every time, right? Because I'm giving it to the dental association, then the insurance group, and then I'm giving it to pet influencers, right? Mm-hmm. And that 4th story will connect the things I want them to care about to their audience. And then the 5th one is usually either a data point or a piece of humor that kind of makes you memorable, that makes people remember you. And it could be what I wore. Most of the time it's self-deprecating humor. I make fun of myself a lot on stage, right? That kind of connects those dots. And like that's kind of my rule. So like, I mean, every virtual presentation, every keynote I give, people always ask do I write a script? Like some people can write a script and they'll memorize the script and they're amazing speakers, right? Yeah. Some speakers will use their slide deck to lead them. Like those 5 points are what drives me. And then I build my slides kind of around those 5 points on my 5 key areas. And that's kind of how I move forward, right? And actually the way I gauge, I'll tie this whole in a bow. The way I engage, we're all tough critics, right? Like I've only given, in my personal opinion, I've only given 1 talk that I got off stage and was like, oh my goodness, it's the greatest talk I've ever given. And it happened to be at Periscope Summit, the very first year Periscope came out. And a meerkatter who was a Periscoper, Alex Kahn, I was the closing session. He spoke at lunchtime and he literally gave the talk I planned on giving verbatim. Like everything he said was like what I was going to say. And I just decided, I was like, you know what? I'm going to build 10 slides from the heart and exactly what I care about. I'm going to go up on stage and I'm going to share that. And it was, still is. I remember that talk. It'll be the talk that, it was the talk that I saw the power of what I was doing. I really fell in love with everything. But the way that I gauge an epic talk is when an audience comes up to me, people are like, oh my God, I love what you did. You love your talk. And I will often say like, what was your favorite part? Or what's the thing you took away the most? And if what they took away aligns with one of those 3 things, that's an epic talk. If they start to take away something and I'm like, you took that away. Then I have to ask myself, right, was that my goal? And if it, it might be so good, but then I might be like, ooh, if that's what they took away, maybe that should be one of my 3 for the next time. But like that's the way I look at it, right? And you can even do a live stream when you're doing a solo show, right? Without talking to the camera. I do the 5 things when I'm doing a solo show because I talk fast, I talk a lot, I go down random rabbit holes. But the cool thing is when you have those 5 things, you always have a centering place. I'm never lost. I'm never worried about, did I hit my mark? Because I have those 5 things to keep me centered.
I love it. Awesome. Awesome. I got a couple more. Hope you got some time still left.
I got you.
Okay, so I'm going to go back. You've already mentioned this a little bit, but in this current epidemic of 2020 climate, where is your stage now? Let's get more now into the virtual shift and what you had to do to get into this climate, whereas some other people couldn't make that shift currently. So let's get into that.
For me, like the shift was, I had a week of very, and it was probably earlier than most people because, I was at an event called Social Media Marketing World. And when we got there on Friday, we were like, man, it sucks to live in these other countries that have to deal with COVID, right? And then by Sunday, we were like, should we be shaking hands? And then Monday, collectively, we were getting events canceled. I was actually sitting next to my good friend Ann Hanley, and we were both speaking at the same event in a couple months. And we both got the email like, hey, we're canceling this event. And we were like, oh man, this is real, right? And then that week, I had like the, woe is me, losing my client. Every client would call and say like, Brian, so we know we work with you on content, we're doing this, but it's really tied to an event. So could we press pause or could we, terminate the contract? And of course, at the time, like, what are we gonna say? No, like we're all kind of going through it. But what I kind of looked at immediately was like the physical stage, which I love, is always what I enjoy. But it kind of goes back to that statement I made early on that like what we do online will never replace what we do offline. But there's so many things that we can do online that aren't physically possible offline. And that's how I started to look at it and say, okay, how can I take what I'm really good at on stage, right? Let's throw away the mechanics. Let's look at the things that I help people do, right? What do I help them accomplish? What problems do I help them see? What perspectives do I help them change? Maybe, what check boxes do I make? And then I took those and said, okay, if I was going to reinvent content or any experience online, how would I deliver that, right? Because there's a reason for the last 10 years that webinars haven't replaced conferences because let's face it, most webinars suck. They're boring. Most of us sign up for a bunch of webinars and we don't ever attend because we're like, oh, I'm going to attend. And then we're like, well, we'll watch the recording. We don't even watch the recording. Like, let's be real. Like we sign up, we get the recording and we just never watch it. And so when I looked at this, what I started to ask myself was, how do we change that, right? Like, what is that problem? And part of it was educating people that there are virtual experiences that you can create that are better than a webinar, right? That are more invested, more strategic. And I really focused on education of the global audience, right? Like I just started pumping out a crap load of content and people were like, how are you going to monetize that? And my answer kept being, I can't monetize the value that I provide until everyone understands what's possible. Yeah. And I think that's a mistake a lot of us make. We're like, hey, I can do an interactive virtual presentation using 5 cameras and virtual overlays. And people are like, I don't care. Like, is it a webinar? Like, I'll give you $3,000, right? Like, they're like, and so I really worked hard at that, right? Like finding my way. I knew as a whole that I wasn't a meetings expert, but I was a virtual event expert. Yeah. And I was like, you know what? Meeting experts don't have virtual experience. And so I started writing on tweets, Instagram, commenting and saying, hey, what can I help you with virtual? And I was giving away to every meeting planner I could connect with, every meeting person. Like, hey, I know your business has got completely crashed. So did mine. Here's some things you want to learn, right? And all of a sudden they were like, let me bring you in this private Slack group. Hey, let me bring you in. And all of a sudden I started, and because I knew I didn't want to be the guy that all of a sudden went into every meeting group. And I was like, I'm the meeting expert now. Like, you all don't know what you're talking about. I'm the meeting expert, right? And that was kind of my path, right? I was very strategic with it. But I can tell you, hasn't been all, roses. Like a lot of brands right now want virtual. They want to figure it out, but they're not even sure what's that value, how to monetize it. Like, what is that? What's the value of someone's presentation? And even as speakers, a lot of speakers are, and I've learned this throughout the years, right? You could be an amazing YouTuber, but you are horrible on stage because you're great at the edits, the cuts, your audience. You could be an amazing keynote speaker, and I know a bunch that are amazing off stage that you put them in front of a camera and they're robotic, right? And like they're like looking. I'm like, what are you looking at? I don't even know where you're like. What are you doing, right? And so it's going to take a little bit of time for people to weed out what they want, figure out how this whole world goes. And so for me, that's been a lot of the pivot. It's also been very open to learning new ways that people are trying to figure things out, right? So I am dedicated a lot of my time to just consuming and learning, and like even like little things where, I started trying to figure out TikTok influencers. I don't have a keynote that talks about TikTok. I don't have anything that talks about TikTok actually. But I started, connecting those dots, and then I started connecting with some big name TikTok influencers. And then I was like, hey, do you know how to do contracts or brand partnerships? And they're like, no, never done it before. I'm like, let me help you. And part of it was like, I'm going to make a friend with them who's blowing up right now. Right. And who knows how they're going to kind of come back around. What's up, Tony? Look at that. We have lots of near family in the house. So like to me, that's, and COVID, the weird thing about it is like, I talk a lot about change. Like I'm a change fan. I love helping people change, but forced change is not fun. And something that has unknown ending is scary. This whole thing is very scary. So I've been very honest. I've been talking about how I lost my clients. I talked about how, building my revenue from scratch all of a sudden, my hockey stick was taking off as far as keynotes and fees. And I had brought on more of a team. I was really excited for like this to explode and speaking events in 2020. And, I could have been like, woe is me. I could have been complaining. I could have said, I'll find a Band-Aid. I'll do some, things. But for me, it was like, I don't know when offline events are going to come back. And because nobody knows, I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to focus on creating a new revenue stream and going all in on it. And you know what? When offline events come back and I have a problem of deciding which of these two is my primary, that's the best problem in the world. Like the amount of people that came to me like, I just can't decide if I want to make that an income stream. I'm like, because you're worried about having too many income streams, like, no one's worried about me. Like, give me a break, right? So, that's been my kind of mantra. And some days are great. Some, I get lots of leads, but a lot of people aren't ready to close right now. They're not sure how to find the budget for that kind of thing. And so, kind of just rolling with it. And I've been using the hashtag We Got This a lot because I do believe the coolest thing about this whole COVID is that it should remind us all that we're a lot more alike than we are different. Right? We're all figuring out, like, no one's playing. I mean, who would have known we would be locked in our houses? And like my kids here where I live, they've closed the school for the entire fall. They're virtual 100%. Like I would have never, like my 10-year-old's not going to go into a classroom for fourth grade. Like that's just mind-boggling. Like you would have never imagined that. But I think part of that also is like, yes, we never imagined it. Yes, the change is hard, but like we have to be okay with like that concept of like, hey, this is not normal. And you can't expect normal results when things aren't normal, right? And you have to forgive yourself and be willing to, kind of like roll and figure this out as we go. And I don't have a lot of answers. And I'm, for me, this is, it's a journey like it all. And, there's days where I'm pumped up and believe that, we're going to, change the future. But I think the coolest thing for me is that this is the first time we've ever had the ability to decide what we want the future to look like, right? Like each one of us can decide because we've just been rolling with life. And all of a sudden, nobody planned for the post-pandemic America. And all of a sudden, we're going to have a post-pandemic America. And now you have to make those choices. Like, what do you care about in your life, right? The amount of people that said, I'll never work from home. I'm just going to work. All of a sudden, working from home, they have more time with their kids. All of a sudden, they're going to be like, I'm going to turn down those 2 promotions that I thought I cared about because I've now realized what I cared about. And how cool is that? Like we have like, if we can strip away, such, a lot of the sadness and death and a lot of the change that has happened, there's also something beautiful that we get to shape a new future together. And that's where I try to keep my focus on.
I love it, man. I love it. I don't really do this, but I just feel like there's a summary in my head and you can chime in here, but you said so much, and I hope everybody got a lot of this because I definitely did. So I'm just thinking like, because what you've shown us in this hour is the definition of what I'm trying to get the message out of just building your authority platform, building a platform that you're the authority of, no matter what it is, whatever matter what social media platform you're on, if you're offline, if you're online, it doesn't matter. If you build it and you share it, they will come. And you'll see that in my new outro in a minute. But I just think that if I can just sum it up real quick, just like be consistently sharing content. Grab a hold of partnerships that you can leverage, or just not even leverage, just care about them and show that you can help them. And then say your favorite phrase, I guess right now is maybe just, how can I help you?
Yep.
Which is just as perfect in just building and then find out, research and find out how you can help these brands. Now, I'm kind of mumbled that up, but I'm sure you got a course on this somewhere, because this is like a master class in this hour, trust me. So,
well, I don't have a course on it, but I mean, like, I do like where you went on that, because I look at it and say every business is in the business of trust right now. Building trust, maintaining trust, scaling trust, reestablishing trust. Yeah. And the question you have to ask yourself is, how are you building trust in a virtual world that we have today? And here's the hard truth for a lot of people, that this is the hardest part. Mm-hmm. The old adage, my dad instilled on this, right? Let my work do the talking for me. Work hard, work smart, let my work do the talking for you. And here's the problem. In 2020, if you're trying just to let your work do the talking for you, you're going to be drowned out by the fakers, the people that sell unicorns. And so you cannot just rely on the fact that you're doing great work. You have to be the one that puts your story out there. You have to be the one that's building that trust, creating the content, going to where your audience is. But I think more so than anything else, right? It's how are you building trust? How are people discovering who you are, what you're all about? And I think for me, something I didn't touch on that I think is probably a good spot. A lot of people try to start where they think their audience is. And I'm actually, my advice is going to be opposite. You have to start where you're most comfortable, because it's hard to tell your story. It's like, I would have never admitted that I have ADHD and I'm medicated for it 5 years ago, right? All of a sudden it became part of my story. And now it's something I tell on stages in front of thousands of people. And it's associated with my brand. But part of that was just because it was something I started to drip out and started to realize it connected with people, started to realize it was something I could grow on. And you don't know until you kind of put that out there. And so the thing I tell people is that if you start like, oh my goodness, I think my audience is on YouTube, I'm going to go on YouTube. But then you don't know SEO, you don't know hashtags, you don't know thumbnails. All of them become excuses for you not to tell your story. And a year from now, you're going to be like, I was going to do YouTube, but I just haven't figured these things out. And I'm like, well, that's crap, right? Press the damn button, right? And so my answer is, find out where you are and get my Google Hangout show that I had for all those years. It wasn't a big show. We did it simultaneous with a Twitter chat, but that was where I cut my teeth, and it's where I fell in love with the live component, right? And then when Meerkat came out, it was like, oh my goodness, this is the medium for me. But if I hadn't done 3 years of Google Hangouts, Meerkat would not have been what it was for me. Meerkat would not have turned into me telling stories on podcasts and the ways, even the stage. I say this a lot, I would not be the speaker I was today if it wasn't for Google Hangouts and Meerkat, right? Google Hangouts and Meerkat helped me hone my story, find my audience, figure out this entire message, which have allowed me to build this business that allows me to travel the world, 76 countries that I've been to. And so that's where it is. And I like your message on authority. And I think the thing that we have to remember with authority is that, just like influence, right? When we talk about influencer marketing, it's about that connection, right? I always say, for me, I don't care how many followers you have. I care about how many people will make a decision or react based on what you're doing, what you say, right? Mm-hmm. And it could be good or bad. All of a sudden I'm using this sunglasses. They're like, I don't like them on Brian. I'm gonna use the other ones. But whatever that trust connection is. But I think that's the magic, right? And if you can influence 3 people, have authority and express your authority to 3 people, and those 3 people, are going to be your clients that give you $25,000 a year, and you're going to bring in 75 grand with 3. You can have 3 followers and be better than everyone that's out there with hundreds of thousands of followers. And I think authority is a great way to put it, because that's really where I hone in. And I'm very blessed. Even the brands I work with now, they have opportunities to work with people that have way bigger followers than I do, but they know that the audience that I have has that level of trust that A, I won't work with people unless it's aligned, and B, when I do work with somebody and it goes well, I'm going to say it. If it goes wrong, I've done that a lot too, right? Meerkat, I got known on Meerkat for showing products that I was sent for free that didn't work. Right? Like that's what I would do. Like I would get boxes. Like somehow my address that got shared out. I would have boxes every week, like stacked up to my door of random live streaming equipment. And it was like, hey, this is the perfect here. This is the and like most of it was not doing what they said it would do. And I would just kind of, but I wasn't bashing the brand. I was very authentic in like the conversation. So I love the authority message. I do believe, it all, and it all comes back to this message, right? Yeah. You won't know what works until you press the damn button, and you got to start somewhere.
I lost you there. I lost you in the feed there. We lost him there a little bit in the middle of the show. Hold on. Let's see if he comes back here. Let's see if he comes back. This is awkward, folks. But we got some comments here. Let me just get some comments here while we're live here. Everybody's just saying, I guess, got a large people in here. A lot of people in here for Meerkat. He's back on. He's back on here.
My GoPro battery died. Sorry.
Oh, so you know what? You broke the live stream. That's all happened. You broke the live stream. We got a lot of people on here commenting from the Meerkat group. We got Meerkat family. For people, it's so strange that we say Meerkat a lot. A lot of people don't even know what that is at this point either. So that's another lesson to make sure you build your community and not the app itself. So my last question to you, and I actually for all the questions, all of my guests, and you kind of already did this, but if you want to like sum it up even more, so people see you here, they see Brian Fanzo, they love what you're doing, they love what you're talking about. They want to go your same path. They want to be you, right? They want to do what you do. Can you explain to them just briefly how they can be an authority in this space?
Sure. So I think it actually starts with actually not being me, right? There's only one of me. I think it's being yourself. Like I know the day, November 2nd, 2013. My mom actually called me out. I'm a mama's boy. And my mom called me out and she's like, Brian, you seem stressed out with everything you share on social media. And she was like, are you sure that you're being like yourself? Because your success in high school, college, like people that you were all about, like you were unapologetic. You wear your hat, you talk fat, you do your thing. And of course I told my mom like, yeah, mom, of course. And then I got off the phone. I was like, man, this isn't right. And I went into my bathroom and I wrote be yourself on the mirror. And I can tell you that day changed everything. And this is the advice I'll give is that I thought social media was stressful and annoying. And I wasn't a huge fan. Everything took so long to create and worry. And it was because there was two things. I wasn't deciding who to follow, right? Like my time is my time. Like if your social media feed is full of depressing and people that are mean and ugly, like unfollow them, right? Block them. Like you decide. Now that doesn't mean you block and unfollow people that disagree. Like I block them. If you're a bully or you're a negative person, I'm gonna block you. But if you're someone that disagrees, but you do it in an educational way, we need that, right? But you should be the one that's in charge of what you decide is in your feed. And then the second thing is stop telling stories you think the audience wants to tell and start telling your story. And that's what changed for me, November 2nd, 2013. And it's been my secret ever since, right? I think if someone wants to follow my method, it's go back and ask yourself, like, what's my true character? Who am I? What do I want to become? And then how do I start figuring out how to put it out there? And like I said, I've done everything, from blogs to videos to vlogging to live streaming, to podcasts. And I tried a little bit of everything and kind of like roll with, I like to say I try everything and I lean into what works until it stops working. And then I try everything again and I lean into what else is working. And I think that's kind of the beauty of where we're at now is the possibilities are limitless, if you're willing to look for them.
I love it. I actually have one last question that I have to ask you. And I want the honest truth on this question, please.
Yes, sir.
Patriots, Steelers.
Oh, all day. Get out of here with that Patriots stuff. No, sir.
All right. I had to get that in there.
I know.
So tell everybody where they can connect with you further. Because I know they're going to want to. They will be crazy not to. So tell them where they can find you after this show, please.
Well, if you were listening from the beginning, the very first tip I gave was consistency. And I like to practice what I preach. So I'm iSocialFans on every single social network there is. My speaking website is brianfanzo.com, has all my virtual keynote speaking, all that stuff is up there. I host 2 podcasts right now, Fomo Fans, which I've taken a 4-month break on from COVID. I felt like our fear was kind of heightened, but that will be making a return next week, actually. Nice. And I have a new podcast called Press the Damn Button, where it's an interview style podcast. So those are the 2 out there. So yeah, I'm on every social network, iSocial Fans. And then this is my newest YouTube channel that you put up there. And it's all about virtual presentations, virtual events, how to be more authoritative on camera, live streaming, like that, this kind of world that we live in. I'm trying to create, 1 or 2 videos a week up there, which is a lot of fun, right? And for me, it's not about getting a bunch of views, but hopefully helping all of us kind of figure out how to operate on this. So yeah, thanks for having me on. Always a pleasure, Brian, with the Y, even though your name is spelled wrong. We're still cool with that part. And I forgot Joanne's a Pats fan. Hey, Joanne. Joanne's a Pats fan too. It'll be interesting. Soon it'll be Pats Steelers with no Brady and no Ben Roethlisberger.
That is true.
And that's going to be a weird world, right?
It's going to be very weird.
We've had that rivalry with those 2 worlds. We've been spoiled.
We definitely have. Definitely have. Okay, Timmy, we got some great love here. Awesome stuff. I told everybody this is going to be epic. I told people it was going to be epic. Oh man! So I have no other words unless you have any last words of wisdom. You did it all, man. You have anything else?
Press the damn button.
Awesome stuff, man. So my last thing is that we are in the middle of my 8-week digital product giveaway as we transition from the live stream to the podcast. We are, if you want to get onto it this week, we are giving away some Apple AirPods. So get on that.
I saw you were giving away GoPros before too. I got all that right here. Look at that.
Oh yeah. So I know you got all the toys. You got all the toys. So if you want to get one of those this week, go to theauthorityletter.com and get on that giveaway. And we're going to have about 4 more weeks of these giveaways. So get on that as Brian switches up to different videos. This guy is a savant with video. Trust me. Check out his profile. I believe his stories are incredible. So I'm just going to tap on some other comments before we got here. But thank you so much, Fanzo. Awesome stuff. Meerkat family, I love you for coming in here. We got Carlos coming in here next week. So Carlos Gill as well. So let's keep the Meerkat love going.
Meerkat's going to continue, for sure.
So thank you so much, man. I appreciate you, man. Always. And let's stay connected. And that is a wrap for this episode of the Authority Project. Let's kick it to the outro.
And that's a wrap for this episode of The Authority Project. Thanks so much for tuning in. And if you like what you heard, we want to hear from you. Subscribe, rate, and give an honest review. Share and tell your friends so they can hear too. And for even more authority-building tactics, be sure to sign up at theauthorityletter.com. Get free weekly content and ongoing digital product giveaways to help you on your entrepreneurial journey. We certainly hope you got a key takeaway, or maybe an aha moment from today's broadcast. Just remember, it's your authority. Build it, share it, and they will come. Until next time.